have an understanding of the different types of drywall that are out there. In addition, there are many ways to install drywall correctly and many ways to install it incorrectly. In this next video, you'll get a basic understanding on how to install drywall. But know this, after this video is completed, we have a whole series for you to watch how to install drywall. And the reason is, we want you guys to become experts at knowing and recognizing how to install drywall correctly. This way, when you're having drywall installed at one of your properties, you know if it's being done correctly. And there are many things that can go wrong when installing drywall. For example, one of the main things that you realize and that you will see that I insist on is you must take a picture of every wall before the drywall is up. So you go into a room, there's 4 walls, you take a picture of each wall, and then you take a picture of the ceiling. And the reason that this is so important is I've had drywall people, when they go in there, they just rock and roll, and I've had them cover up electrical boxes, light fixtures, vent covers, heat registers. They just cover it up. I often tell all the people who work with me, I'm like, listen, these drywall guys, if I was standing in the wall, they'd cover me up. All right? So it's extremely important that you take pictures of every one of your walls so that you can make sure that you know, and you go back and you can check and make sure that these drywall guys didn't cover up your stuff. And if they did, you have a good understanding of where it's at and the location it is. All right, this has happened way too many times, and that's why we insist that this happens. And especially since you're managing the job, not at the job site, but virtually. And this becomes very important that you have this discipline of taking the pictures when all the rough work is done prior to drywall. Okay, now let's talk about. Let's explain hanging drywall. Okay, and I'm going to show you a video that explains hanging drywall. But before, I kind of want to give you this breakdown. In drywall, there's 2 areas. There's the hanging of the drywall, and then there's the tape and spackle. Usually not done by the exact same person, but it should be done by the exact same crew. Because if the drywall is not hung correctly, it makes the tape and spackle guy's job much more difficult. So there needs to be that coordination, and you, after watching these videos, should understand that. So if you try and get one person to do the hanging of it, and then a completely separate person to do the tape and spackle, you might want to make sure that the guy who hung it did a good job, because if not, your tape and spackle guy could, end up charging you more money because of all the things he has to go back and fix or extra work he has to do. So when it comes to hanging drywall, real quick on this outline, you start with your ceilings. You'll probably see this in some of the videos that you watch in the future, but we always start with the ceilings. You got to make sure that your room is square. A lot of times you don't have a perfect 90 degrees, okay? And you got to know how to compensate for that. And you need to know when you're putting in your drywall, where are your studs? If you're drawing straight to studs, and a lot of times what we do, because a lot of times the houses have lath and plaster, and I don't take down lath and plaster. It opens up permit problems. I keep that lath and plaster, and I'll put the drywall on top of it. So you need to know, when you're doing that, make sure that's screwed in right. And then as far as the walls, when it comes to hanging, again, square walls, level walls, that's important. Start at the top, work your way down. Usually you're going to install your drywall landscape. That means the long ways, going long ways this way, not the portrait like this, but the long ways. That's the majority of times of how we do it in residential. Then you're going to stagger the installation. That means if your 8 foot is going this way, then underneath it, you're going to start 4 foot over and stagger it so they're not on top of each other, they're staggered. And that you make sure it's screwed in correctly. That's on the hanging side. Then we'll go over the tape and spackle side, which is, again, you got to understand your materials. You got your compounds and plaster mixtures. You've got your tapes, and you've got your corner beads and caps. So again, there's a variety of stuff out there. You need to have a good understanding of that. And then mainly, with installing tape and spackle, you must have an understanding of taper joints versus butt joints. And this goes back into the hanging the sheetrock. You always want to try and get your butt joints together and your taper joints together. You don't want to have a taper and a butt. That creates a little bit of a problem, okay, when it comes to the spackling of it. And if you do have a situation like that, you can V-groove it, which means you cut out the butt side to kind of give it a little bit of a groove and pre-fill it. That way it hides the imperfections. And then, there's videos on watching, your first coat, then your second coat, then your third coat. You go back, you prime it, you do your touch-ups. Again, this is not going to be explained so much in these videos. We're going to just touch on the basics of it. But we have a series of videos that you'll watch after this that will make you pretty much an expert at taping and spackling. Okay, having said that, let's watch this introduction into hanging drywall.
So the first thing you want to do whenever you start a drywall project is prep the space. You can't just throw drywall on any ceiling or wall. You got to make sure that there's no screws or nails in your studs. You also want to check if you have insulation, if there's anything sticking out. You're going to want to make sure that it's stapled up. The most important things you want to make sure of is that your ceiling is level and that it's not wavy. Otherwise you're going to notice it. It's going to be a terrible finish. So get an 8-foot level, put it up, and make sure you're good to go. In our case, we had to use furring strips. But now that everything is perfect, we can get started. Okay, so I've already essentially gone through all the studs. I've hammered any staples that were sticking out. I've unscrewed any screws that were out, pulled out any nails that were there, and don't let your contractor hammer those nails in. That saves time. Just pull them out. Any protrusions can poke through on the drywall and also just give you an uneven surface. So you want to make sure that the walls are clear of obstructions. Next, this is very important. So ceilings are always hung first. When you hang the walls after you hang a ceiling, the walls are also giving the ceilings additional support because with gravity, that's what's going to give first. I also screw everything. A lot of people tend to nail the perimeter because it's a little faster and nails are less expensive than screws. Just screw everything. If you ever walk through a house and you see those little circular humps that are random every once in a while, that is called a nail pop. Now to avoid that, don't use nails. Now a lot of people say if you nail around the perimeter and you tape your seams, the tape is going to hold those in. Over time, eventually, it can work itself out. So just if you screw it in, there's no problem. It's still a little bit more expensive, but it's also a better hold. And this is a personal preference, but you don't have to use glue on the studs, construction adhesive, if you screw everything. I put about 25 screws in, 25 screws per sheet, a 4x8 sheet, which is super solid, and I can sleep at night, right? Because if there was a nail in there that pops in the middle of the night, I don't know what I would do. I'd go crazy. All right, so let's get started on this first piece.
Your beautiful assistant is here to help you.
I'd like to introduce you to my beautiful assistant, Sarah. So we're going to use 5/8 drywall on the ceiling. We're going to screw it in. So your drywall sheet is 8 feet long, but we want to break on the stud. So our measurement is going to be 90.5.
Great.
So I've already marked out most of our studs, but you want to make sure that you know exactly where the beams are going to go, or where your studs are at, because once you cover it up, you're going to need to know where to screw. You want to grab me the T-square?
Yes.
I'm going to actually score this twice, just because
You learn from our mistakes.
It's 5/8. It's thick. All right. Actually, when you're taking off more drywall, it's easier to break. Those thin pieces are what get you in trouble. So I just lift this up and I hit it. I give it a good hit and it breaks just like that. Get my knife, I go on the back side. Just cut that paper and then it just bada bam, comes right off.
Bada bam?
Bada bam. In order to get a nice smooth finish, you're going to take your rasp and you're just going to run it right over this. Like so. Alright, now what I like to do is the factory end or finished end of a piece is the end of the board that you're not cutting, and this is the side that you cut. Now whenever you cut a piece, you want to put that towards the wall. You want to leave your factory end facing this way so that when you butt up the next piece of drywall, it's as smooth and straight as possible. Alright, so we're going to have to spin this around.
Okay.
So if you find yourself missing the stud, just put your drill in reverse. And this thing doesn't engage until it has pressure on it. So it's kind of cool because you can drill and it's not really drilling. But you can't unscrew a screw out of drywall, so you got to put some pressure on the side and it just kind of pops out here. It brings it out just enough so that you can grab it and unscrew it.
Awesome.
And then when you go to finish, you just go right over that and fill it. So to keep in mind is you never want to screw your factory edge until the next piece of drywall is up, because you can blow out the drywall. So in other words, if I screw right here, some of this material can blow out and it will actually impact the flush finish of the next piece. So first you hang the next piece, screw that one in, and then come back to this seam and screw on both sides along the seam, which I'll show you in a second. We put can lights in the garage. I like LED can lights, and also I wanted multiple lights in here where the garage would clear the light, so anything hanging down is a problem. But we still have to cut these holes in the drywall. Now I use a rotozip. Now we need to mark these out before we hang the piece of drywall. So I'm going to put a big arrow right here, which is approximately the center of the can light, and then I'm going to measure to the center from the piece of drywall. It's 12 inches. I'm just going to drop my tape measure that was planned. And then I'm going to put a 12 right here. So once we hang the piece of drywall, it'll actually hang just fine because this has a little bit of give. And then we come back with a rotozip, measure out 12 inches, and, well, I'll just show you, right? Another thing you want to keep in mind is whenever you're hanging the next piece, you don't ever want to break on the same stud. So this way your butt joints, is what these are called, are staggered. This way you get a nice smooth finish when you mud. I guess butt joints. And also another thing is people call drywall compound mud. At least I do. At least I've been doing it for like 18 years. So drywall compound is the same thing as mud. So when you mud up the walls or you put your drywall compound on there, you want your butt joints to not be lined up. You want them to be staggered. So we're going to go a little bit shorter on this next piece of drywall right here. So I'm going to
butt joints.
Let's mark out this light. 12 inches. So that's on point. All right. Mask, please. Can never be too safe when dealing with drywall dust. So this is a rotozip. Yeah, you got to be kind of proficient with this, but once you learn how to do it, it just makes everything so much easier. It's so much better than having to like measure everything out and cut the exact shape of a box or a light fixture that you're doing. This guy, you just mark it out, stick right in the middle, go to the outside, and then go clockwise. And the blade actually follows the seam and works its way in towards your light fixture if you go clockwise. If you go counterclockwise, it'll like spin off into space, so don't do that.
we finished the ceiling, so now we can start the wall.
Correct.
Great, and we can now use 1/2-inch drywall, which is so much less heavy.
So much easier to hang walls. It's 1/2 inch, it's mold resistant, and we can just use our standard 1.25 inch screws.
And now we're finally going into regular 2x4s.
Yep.
So
what I want you to do is actually go up on the drywall here. You might need a stool.
Oh, and mark them all out?
And mark out where the studs are at. So we can see, when we hang the top piece first, we'll be able to see where the stud's at.
Right.
But we won't necessarily see exactly where it is on top. So I just give myself a nice little arrow
Why not?
I can line it up, right?
Okay.
If you have outlets that are already installed, ideally you want to hang drywall when your outlets are not installed. But if they are installed, that's okay. I know you're probably thinking, oh my god, there's an outlet in the wall. Nick, what do I do? But don't worry, there's a real simple solution to that. You just gotta get a screwdriver, take the outlet out, and you're gonna angle it, which I'll show you in a second. You're gonna cut a little hole, pull it through, put it on, route it out, screw the whole board on. Let me show you, it's probably easier that way, right? Okay. Whenever you're messing with any type of receptacle, switch, or anything electric, dun, 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 ba, dun, dun. No. Make sure you turn the breaker off so you don't hurt yourself. So I'm just going to take these 2 screws out with a Phillips head screwdriver, number 2, and we're just going to pull this receptacle out so it's exposed. So I'm going to take this receptacle and I'm just going to bend it so it's sticking kind of out like a torpedo. The idea is to cut a hole big enough for this to go through. So I want to put this receptacle through this little hole. Do you want to screw this in?
Yeah.
Cool. So this is a kicker. And what you do is you kick it and you just push it up and it brings the drywall up to meet the seam of the one above. Alright, so now that we pulled turned off the power and pulled the receptacle to the right, I'm just going to feel for the side of the box, and then I want to aim for the outside of the box and then go clockwise around the box.